Hey everyone, welcome to the Good Enough Mompreneur podcast, where we talk about everything motherhood and business minus the perfection. And this week we're going to talk about identity, learning to stop resisting and start existing. Hey Mompreneurs, thank you for joining me this week. My name is Angela Michuli, your host of the Good Enough Mompreneur podcast. How are you doing? I hope you have had a good week. It has certainly been a busy one for us. And man, October is really around the corner. I'm beginning to feel the holidays approaching, which is pretty crazy. And then today I'm recording this on American Business Women's Day. And it's really cool if you look into that holiday. I can leave a link in the show notes about the background of this holiday, which was started in post-World War II times. It's really interesting that even then, when it was not even common to have women in the workplace, that a day like today was created to help support diversity in business. And you know, it's really amazing when you look at the millions of female entrepreneurs in the country and worldwide. It's really touching to think that you're part of that as an entrepreneur, a female entrepreneur. And there's, you know, a section of that are mompreneurs. And there's certainly a kinship. Anytime I talk to a mom who's also an entrepreneur, you know, you just get it. You get what it's like and how difficult it is to juggle having a family and also running a business. So kudos to you. I applaud all of the female entrepreneurs out there today. I'm just super honored to be among so many talented women who are just really changing things in our country and certainly globally. So this week's episode is counterpart to last week's episode, where I talked about living on autopilot. And I will link that episode in the show notes just in case you haven't listened to it or want to listen to it again, because these two episodes really go hand in hand. And as I mentioned in that episode, I started on my journey I had been an entrepreneur for years, and I really didn't see myself as an entrepreneur. I really never stopped to think, hey, you know what, I'm an entrepreneur. But I had worked as an independent contractor in the legal industry for a decade, and done various things, and just never really considered myself an entrepreneur until I started opening other businesses in 2019. But one of the things that I realized on that journey was my identity, what I thought of myself. So I think we have to begin at the starting point and really define what identity is, and talk about all the different types of identity and the specific ones that I'm going to talk about today. So, and why is it even important to think about your identity? Angela, you've got a business podcast. You have a Mompreneur podcast. Let's talk about how do I get X, Y, and Z done while I juggle children and carpool and after school activities and snacks and, closing a deal while I also have to do all those other things. And one of the biggest problems is that we focus on the execution so much that we don't realize that we need to get the mindset straight first. And I believe I've said this before. Business is 80 to 90% mindset, 20 to 10%, 10 to 20%, actual strategy and execution. I kid you not. If you really are focusing on the right things in your business to make it grow and grow yourself as a person, as the leader and the captain of your business, you truly need to begin in the basic fundamentals first. Or at some point, you're going to be able to create the fancy website, open the business, do all of the things, and you're going to feel really empty and likely not understand why you're so frustrated and why your business isn't growing. So there are just a series of lessons that I'm doing right now that are really focusing on those basic fundamental mindset issues that you need to address. The sooner the better. So, one of the first things that you need to really think about is what your identity is. Who do you see yourself as first? And for instance, in my case, I really saw my identity, at least professionally, as a legal professional. And that was problematic in a couple of ways. Because, number one, you have to really think about how I found myself in that profession in the first place. Which, if I really go back to, the beginnings of my career, it was a suggestion by my mom. She knew that my skills would really fit certain roles in the legal profession. And I took her suggestion. I received her validation. I received the validation of my coworkers. It was something that I found easy to do when other people struggled to do it. Even went on to teach and do lots of different things in the industry. And that was truly kind of a large part of my identity, at least professionally. And when something is such a large part of your identity, there is a couple of problems. One, you run the risk of not being authentic to yourself, because is this really for you? There are so many people who go to law school, that go to medical school, that do lots of things, their careers in their lives, and it's because that's what their parents told them to do, or that's what they receive validation and approval from their families or their friends or their loved ones, society, and they kept going down this track, never questioning if it was something that they really wanted to do. And especially with me, I found I didn't realize this, but when I wanted to progress in the field, because my identity was so connected to my, what I thought of myself and who I thought I wasn't looking for validation within myself. I was looking for validation from anyone I worked with, any professional who was in a position to, give me accolades or a promotion or recommend me for a special award, any of those things. And when those things didn't happen, when people didn't do what I thought that they should do, or let's say I interviewed for a job that I knew I would be perfect for, and maybe I didn't get it, then it was crushing, because that person that I thought should give me the validation didn't. So I think it really just set me on this course to get a very high level of education, a very high, several certifications, doing all of the things, taking many volunteer positions and volunteer leadership positions for which I put many hours of my time and efforts into, never received any compensation. I might have received some appreciation for sure, but just like a plaque to put on my wall and a little blurb to put on my LinkedIn profile or my resume. But I think it really led me to a point where I felt very empty, where I wasn't getting the validation at a certain point that I really thought that I should be getting. And the problem was not that I wasn't good at my job, actually quite the opposite. But I was really empty because that validation didn't come from me. I wasn't filling my own cup first before I was filling everybody else's cup up. So your identity, it's really, what sets you apart and makes you unique, or it should be. That's the ideal identity. But oftentimes through life, we pick up identities that we just receive validation from along the way. We find ourselves in a situation where we feel appreciated and loved, and we just fit in and we go with it and never question it. But if you keep on that track, you're probably going to find yourself where you're living in autopilot. And that's where last week's episode comes in. And I finally was in a position where I needed to stop living in autopilot. Like I had no choice. I knew, like number 10 on the list was, I knew there was more. I knew I had more to offer. People were not recognizing me. I was waiting for an opportunity for somebody like, pick me, let me demonstrate to you what I was going or capable of doing. And that was just silly. I just, now that I think about it, I wanted an opportunity to lead. I wanted an opportunity to demonstrate my abilities. But I had to sell myself first, quite honestly. So that really led to a moment where I knew I had to make a decision to take a different direction career-wise. And a lot of things came together at one point that kind of forced my hand. I had to make the decision just because of my family life. But it was one of the most difficult things I've ever done, to walk away from a client that I had a great relationship with. And it was very difficult for me to then start anew with some new projects and with a new identity. And really, it just stripped away everything and allowed me to begin the process of rebuilding myself and really getting in touch with who I authentically am, to be able to offer that, to serve to my clients, to be able to help other mompreneurs find that same authentic self, to be able to create their businesses and their life and their family life around who they really are, instead of constantly trying to do what they think everybody else wants them to do. So I that's a lot of information right there, and I've been recording for about 15 minutes. But that is a whole scenario that at one time in my life I never ever imagined playing out, but it did. And I kind of hit bottom in a way with my identity and started putting the pieces back together, finding what I like to do and how I like to do things, and really what my strengths are. I am just like a natural born leader. But one of the things that I really struggled with was, especially in the legal industry, I had been consistently shown women who were very aggressive, and I didn't think, that's just not who I am. I didn't think that I could be a respected leader or even a leader of a business or anything else and not also have those aggressive traits. It sounds crazy, but the stories that we tell ourselves are crazy. And it's really not we're telling ourselves. You have to begin to understand how our brain works, in that your ego is consistently in the process of trying to protect you, and 90% or more of our thoughts are just on autopilot from everything we've gone through our lives, and that's where I was at. And I really don't want to see other moms, women go through that, because it's really important that you stop and think about the story you're telling yourself about who you are. Stop and think about your identity. And I just listened to a TED Talk by Ferrara, and I'm going to link it in the show notes. And she called it, and one of the last lines in her talk was, stop resisting to start existing. And that's exactly what it is. It's like we use all of these different messages from all of the experiences in our life to resist or hide or not be the authentic person that you're supposed to be. Because that true authentic person is your superpower. And that is exactly what she talks about in her TED Talk. So it's definitely a great listen. And so let's just talk about for a minute some of the different identities that we can have. And actually, I might have talked about this for a minute, but so think about the fact that your identity is a series of belief systems, values, ethics, morals. You're not born with these. Like, you're not born with the belief in Santa Claus. You know, that's something that if, you grow up in a certain type of family, that it's just part of the culture or part of just your experience as a child. So think about all the things like that just have been handed down to you. Various beliefs that you have. So we usually have career identities, we can have educational identities, we certainly have cultural identities, and all of these things are really set you apart. But sometimes you can have an identity shift, a change. You begin to search for your purpose and your sense of self. And that process helps us refine our identity. And some people refer to that as an identity crisis. And I've heard a really great concept of, people live a first life and a second life. You kind of spend your first part of your life learning all of these things and taking in all of these, beliefs and experiences, and then the second half of your life you kind of sort out what you want to keep and what you want to change and filter out. And in that process, somebody can have an identity crisis. So I want to break down what an identity crisis is and why we have them. And I'm going to go back again to the importance of learning just how your brain works. Because when you start to harness that and understand that, it's really a key to a lot about learning to achieve what you want to achieve and not being in reactive mode to the biology in your brain and, just being a victim to that. So what happens when you have an identity crisis? Like I mentioned before, they estimate that up to 98% of your thoughts every day are just on repeat. They're the thoughts you had the same day before and the same day before and the same day before. Very little each day do we stop and critically, purposefully, mindfully think about what we're doing and the effect that it's having on our life. So that's when you're in default autopilot mode. We talked about changing that last week and what that type of life is like. So when you're just kind of operating in this life that your subconscious is kind of running the conversation in your head, and therefore your thoughts become actions, and that creates your reality, and that leads to a lot of unhappiness. So what happens when you start to begin to change your identity? Which, as an entrepreneur, you very well may be going through that process. You may be doing something different, completely different, like I did. I started a business that was a complete change from all that I had ever done in like every way. But then too, just running a business and doing a lot of things that you may have been an employee your entire working career. And one of the hardest things that people have a hard time to do when they start a business is thinking like a CEO rather than an employee. So that in itself is a huge identity shift, a huge mindset shift. So what happens to your brain when you go through this process, when you create this big change in your life? So you're going to activate the 4-alarm fire alert in your brain. Your subconscious is going to start telling you really terrible things about yourself. You're going to start thinking you're bad, you can't accomplish anything that you want to, you're going to come up with excuses, you're going to feel pretty worthless because you have activated this flight or fright or freeze reaction in your brain. So it's really important for you to understand that all the messages that your brain tells you are not the truth. It will definitely try to fool you. It will play tricks on you. But if you go into this evolution, this change of becoming an entrepreneur, and you expect this, then you are setting yourself up for a lot more success than many other people do who start a business. So, the other reason why you need to understand that this is how your brain works is you're going to put all of this effort into starting your business, and you're not going to understand the right process that you need to take to actually achieve the goals that you want to. So how do you do that? You have to work on reprogramming your brain. I swear. Okay, I'm going to say that again. You have to work on reprogramming your brain. I'm not lying. I'm not, some yoga teacher guru. This is really legit stuff that you have to understand about how your brain works and you just simply have to start working to reprogram it. You have to work and train your mind as if you were an athlete training for a marathon. You cannot miss a day. You have to consistently keep at it and understand and realize its importance. And in very short time, you will begin to see the benefits. So how do you begin to work on reprogramming your brain? You're doing it right now by listening to this podcast. To begin to allow a crack in the foundation of how you have thought your entire life. That in itself is beginning to reprogram your brain. So you have to literally feed your mind with positive information, with things, words, meditations. Guided meditations are my best friend. Affirmations. You have to actively work on changing the beliefs that you have. You have to actively work on changing the story, the tape that is on repeat in your head. The negative one has to be replaced with a positive one. As corny as that sounds, as cliche as that might sound, that is exactly what you have to intend to do. So as you begin to do this, and the thing is another problem with people who do not understand how the brain works, is they put in all of this effort, or they wait to have confidence to start their business, but they don't realize that if you stare fear in the face and you understand that all of the lies that your brain is telling you are not true, and you take action despite that, you're going to begin to see results, and your brain is going to begin to calm down. And then you start to regain your life. You start to gain confidence. And then as you're actively working on changing your beliefs and taking actions towards your goals, you're going to start seeing results. And then guess what? Your brain's less scared, and then you're more confident. And then here's the bad news. Every time you get to a new level of understanding, you're going to realize that there is a new fear you're going to have to face. It gets a little easier, but you're going to have to go through this cycle again, where you identify your fear, you face it, you take little actions, you tell your brain to shut up, and you start to see the benefits of your little actions, and you gain more confidence, and your brain calms down. It's literally the cycle of every time you want to level up, change your reality, change your understanding, gain a new skill, grow as a person. All of those things that probably are in the horizon of your goals, that is exactly the steps that you have to take. So if you are feeling frustrated, if you're feeling depressed and stagnant, we don't usually make a change in our lives unless there's some level of pain, some level of something that's going to force our hand, because our brain just lives in that comfort zone. And if you try to move out of that comfort zone, then it's gonna just start telling you bad things again. So you have to put yourself in a position where you begin to motivate your own self to change your behavior, to begin to take little actions despite the fear, to see results, and literally change your brain chemistry. I know, it's a ton of information. I'm not a neuroscientist, I'm not a neurologist. I've just figured out a few things in this process that are fundamentally important as an entrepreneur, as a mompreneur, that you have to understand to grow and be successful. So, that's a lot of information. It has taken me years to figure this out. And if I can collapse time for you in the process of listening to this podcast, then that just made that time worth it, and my time worth it sitting here trying to explain it to you. And it's not easy. I will definitely link a podcast interview down below with Pat Flynn on his podcast, where there is a discussion about this very topic that I've literally had to listen to that podcast like 5 times to just kind of sink in all of the information. I will also share Dan McKeown's podcast. He has written a couple of New York Times bestsellers, Effortless and Limitless. He definitely is interested in and shares his quest to understand how our brain works and to achieve more happiness, more of our goals with less effort. And it's just really, mind-blowing how just a mindset shift can help you 2x, 5x, 10x your life. Really interesting stuff. So I think I have left you with enough information today. I am going to leave that there, let it marinate, listen to it a couple of times, and understand how important it is to sit with yourself and really think about what your identity is. And here's the other really important part, is as you want to grow and go to the next level in life, and understand if you're just starting out on this journey, you cannot even conceive the other levels of consciousness that you can grow to understand. But it's just the beginning. There's going to be more levels that you're probably going to want to reach. And every time you've got to go through this process. So it's very important that once you realize you have that identity crisis situation and you begin to create a new identity, never get so attached to that new identity that you're not willing to change it again. But change it for the better. Change it in for an even better version of you. So that's my quest. That's part of my purpose, is to help people, moms, discover their special talents that will allow them to have a business, to stay home and have more happiness in their life, have more impact and more abundance, while also being able to be at home with their children. That is just something I'm so passionate about. So, I'm probably rambling at this point. So, thank you so much for sticking with me through this episode. It's pretty deep stuff. So, I would be so thrilled if you would do me a huge favor and leave a review for the podcast. Share it with a friend. And then, follow me on social media. You can find me on Instagram at angela.masciulli, MASCIULLI, and send me a message about how much you understood or didn't understand this podcast episode. I know that for somebody who's never even began to think about their identity and changing it and what that means and how their brain really operates, I get it. It's a lot. So thank you so much for listening. I look forward to talking to you again next week. And until then, I'm your host, Angela Mishuli, with the Good Enough Mompreneur podcast. I hope you have an amazing weekend and a great next week. I'll talk to you then. Bye.